The last rays of the setting sun painted the dusty main street of Whispering Creek, Colorado, in shades of amber and gold as Kate, Morrison clutched her worn carpet bag tighter and stepped off the stagecoach. The year was 1878, and after a grueling 3-day journey from St. Louis, her body ached and her spirit felt just as battered. She'd come west with nothing but $28 to her name, a teaching certificate, and a desperate need to escape the whispers that had followed her back east. "This is it, miss." "Whispering Creek," the driver announced, tossing down her second bag. "School's at the end of the street past the saloon." Kate nodded her thanks, trying to smooth the wrinkles from her plain brown traveling dress. At 22, she had long since accepted that she wasn't blessed with the kind of beauty that turned heads. Her nose was too prominent, her frame too angular, her brown hair too unruly to be fashionable. "Plain as homespun," her mother had always said with a sigh, as if Kate's ordinary appearance was a personal failing. The town stretched before her, a collection of wooden buildings, some freshly painted, others weathered by the harsh Colorado elements. Men in dusty clothes and wide-brimmed hats moved along the boardwalks, a few casting curious glances her way. Kate lowered her eyes, a habit formed from years of avoiding scrutiny. "You must be Miss Morrison." Kate turned to find a portly man with spectacles and a friendly smile approaching. "I'm Walter Jenkins, head of the town council. We've been eagerly awaiting our new schoolteacher." "Yes, that's me," Kate replied, extending her hand. "Thank you for meeting me." "No trouble at all. Let me help you with those bags. I'll show you to the schoolhouse." There's a small living quarters attached to the back, nothing fancy, mind you, but it should serve. As they walked, Jenkins chattered about the town, the 30-some children who would be her pupils, and the upcoming harvest festival. Kate half listened, her attention drawn to a commotion outside the saloon. A group of cowboys had gathered, their laughter raucous in the quiet evening. Among them stood a tall figure, his back to her, shoulders broad beneath a worn leather vest. Even from behind, something about his stance commanded attention, a quiet confidence that made the others naturally orient around him. As if sensing her gaze, the man turned. Kate quickly looked away, but not before catching a glimpse of a strong-jawed face and eyes the color of a summer storm. "That's Flint Westwood and his ranch hands," Jenkins explained, following her gaze. "Owns the biggest spread in the county, the lazy good man Flint. Bit of a loner since his pa passed, but fair to his men and generous to the town." Kate nodded, stealing another glance. The cowboy Flint was watching her now, his expression unreadable beneath the shadow of his hat brim. "Come along," Jenkins urged. "You must be tired after your journey." The schoolhouse was a simple one-room building with rows of wooden desks facing a larger teacher's desk and blackboard. The living quarters behind it were equally modest, a small bedroom, a sitting area with a cast-iron stove, and a basic kitchen. Still, it was clean and would be hers alone, more privacy than she'd ever had growing up in a house full of siblings. "It's perfect," Kate said, meaning it. "When do classes begin?" "Monday morning. That gives you 3 days to settle in. Oh, and you're invited to dinner at my home tomorrow. My wife insisted, said you shouldn't have to cook your first night in town." After Jenkins left, Kate unpacked her meager belongings, arranging her few books on a shelf and hanging her dresses in the small wardrobe. She moved to the washstand, splashing water on her face, then paused, studying her reflection in the small mirror. The same unremarkable features stared back at her. In St. Louis, her plainness had been merely a disappointment to her mother, who despaired of finding Kate a husband. But in Philadelphia, it had become something else entirely. The memory of Julian Prescott's cruel laughter still burned in her chest. "You'll do well to remember your place, Miss Morrison," he'd said, after she'd naively believed his attentions were sincere. "A woman with your modest attributes should be grateful for any attention, not presumptuous enough to expect courtship." Kate turned away from the mirror. That humiliation was behind her now. Here, she would be defined by her skills as a teacher, not her appearance. Here, she could build a respectable, independent life. The thought comforted her as she prepared for bed, but as she drifted toward sleep, Her mind inexplicably returned to the image of storm-gray eyes watching her from beneath a cowboy hat. Dawn broke over Whispering Creek with a brilliant display of pinks and golds stretching across the vast Colorado sky. Kate had risen early, eager to prepare her classroom before meeting her pupils on Monday. She moved among the desks, checking each slate, arranging books, and writing her name in careful script on the blackboard. Miss Katherine Morrison. A knock at the schoolhouse door interrupted her work. Kate brushed chalk dust from her hands and smoothed her hair before answering. She hadn't expected to find Flint Westwood standing on the steps, hat in hand. Up close, he was even more imposing, tall and broad-shouldered, with a face weathered by sun and wind. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at the nape of his neck, and those gray eyes she'd glimpsed yesterday were indeed the color of storm clouds. "Miss Morrison," he said, his voice deep and rough-edged. "Flint Westwood. I own the Lazy W Ranch, Mr. Westwood," Kate acknowledged, suddenly conscious of her simple blue dress and the loose tendrils of hair that had escaped her practical bun. "What can I do for you? I've got 2 ranch hands with children starting school Monday. Wanted to make sure they had what they needed." He gestured to a wagon behind him where a young boy was unloading packages. "Brought some supplies, paper, pencils, books. Ranch accounts can cover it." "That's very generous," Kate said, surprised. "Education matters out here," he replied simply. "Mind if we bring them in?" Kate stepped aside, watching as Flint and the boy carried in several boxes. There were indeed school supplies, but also a set of maps, a globe, and various books that would greatly enhance her teaching resources. "This is Tommy," Flint said, nodding to the boy, who looked about 15. "His sister Lily and the Harmon boys will be in your class." Tommy tipped his hat shyly. "Madam, it's a pleasure to meet you, Tommy," Kate smiled. "I look forward to having your sister and the others in class." As they arranged the supplies, Kate stole glances at Flint. Despite his rugged appearance, there was something gentle in the way he handled the books, something thoughtful in his conversation with Tommy. It contradicted the image she'd formed of hard-living cowboys. "Been teaching long?" Flint asked as Tommy took the empty boxes back to the wagon. 3 years, Kate replied, "in St. Louis mostly." "What brings you all the way out to Whispering Creek? We're not exactly on the map," Kate hesitated. "I wanted a change, the opportunity to build something of my own." Flint studied her for a moment, as if sensing there was more to the story, but he didn't press. "Well, we're glad to have you. Town's been without a proper teacher since Miss Abernathy left to get married last spring." An awkward silence fell between them. Kate busied herself arranging the new books on a shelf. "I should let you get back to your preparations," Flint said finally. "Town socials tonight at the church. Good way to meet folks before school starts." "Thank you for letting me know," Kate replied, "and thank you for the supplies. They'll be put to good use." Flint nodded, replacing his hat. "Miss Morrison," he said by way of goodbye, and then he was gone, his long strides carrying him back to the wagon. Kate watched him go, puzzled by the brief interaction. There had been something in his eyes when he looked at her, not the dismissive glance she was accustomed to from men, but something more, attentive. Curious, even, shaking off the thought, she returned to her work. She was here to teach, not to indulge in fanciful notions about cowboys with storm-gray eyes. The church social that evening was a lively affair. It seemed the entire population of Whispering Creek had turned out to welcome their new teacher. Kate found herself surrounded by curious townsfolk and excited children, all eager to make her acquaintance. "My Lucy's real good with her letters already," one proud mother boasted. "Jimmy here needs extra help with his sums," another confided. Kate smiled and nodded, trying to remember names and faces, grateful for the warm welcome. Mrs. Jenkins had taken her under her wing, introducing her around and making sure her plate was filled with fried chicken and sweet corn. "Everyone's so kind," Kate remarked as they took a moment's respite at a corner table. "We're just pleased to have a teacher again," Mrs. Jenkins replied. "Especially one with your credentials. Walter was most impressed by your references." Kate was about to respond when the church door opened, and Flint Westwood entered, accompanied by several men who must be his ranch hands. The conversations around them dipped momentarily before resuming, a subtle acknowledgement of his presence. Unlike earlier, Flint was dressed in what must be his best clothes: a clean white shirt, dark vest, and polished boots. His dark hair was damp and combed back from his forehead, and he'd clearly shaved for the occasion. Flint rarely comes to these gatherings, Mrs. Jenkins observed, following Kate's gaze. Keeps to himself mostly since his father died and he took over the ranch, and especially after. She trailed off and Kate's curiosity was piqued. After what? Mrs. Jenkins looked uncomfortable. It's not my place to gossip. Let's just say Flint's had his share of hardships, she brightened. But he's a good man. Did you know he pays for the school books for any child whose family can't afford them? Before Kate could respond, Walter Jenkins appeared with Flint in tow. Miss Morrison, I believe you've met Flint Westwood. Yes, Mr. Westwood kindly delivered some school supplies this morning, Kate said, rising from her seat. Miss Morrison, Flint greeted her with a slight nod. Mr. Westwood is on the school board, Jenkins explained. He's been instrumental in keeping the school running between teachers. This surprised Kate. You're interested in education, Mr. Westwood? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. My mother was a teacher before she married my father. She taught me to value learning. There was something in his tone, a warmth, when he spoke of his mother that softened his rugged features. Would you care to dance, Miss Morrison? Jenkins asked, gesturing to where couples were forming for a Virginia reel. I'm not much of a dancer, Kate demurred. Nonsense, Mrs. Jenkins insisted. Everyone dances at our socials. It's practically mandatory. Before Kate could protest further, she found herself being led to the dance floor. The music started and Kate tried to follow along, acutely aware of her awkwardness. She'd never been graceful, and as she stumbled through the steps, her cheeks burned with embarrassment. When the dance ended, she excused herself and slipped outside, needing a moment of fresh air. The night was cool, stars scattered like diamond dust across the vast Colorado sky. Kate took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart, not enjoying the festivities. She turned to find Flint standing a few feet away, a thin cigar smoldering between his fingers. I just needed some air, Kate replied. I'm not very comfortable in crowds. Flint nodded as if he understood perfectly. Neither am I, yet you came. Same as you, I expect. It's expected. He took a draw from his cigar, then extinguished it against the heel of his boot. You dance fine, by the way. Kate gave a small, disbelieving laugh. You don't need to be kind, Mr. Westwood. I know I was clumsy. Flint, he corrected, and I wasn't being kind, just honest. They stood in silence for a moment, the music and laughter from inside creating a backdrop to the quiet night. Why did you really come to Whispering Creek, Miss Morrison? Flint asked suddenly. St. Louis has plenty of schools, better paying ones too, Kate stiffened. As I said, I wanted a change. Most people don't travel halfway across the country for a change unless they're running from something. When Kate didn't respond, he added, or someone, You're very direct, Mr. Westwood. Flint, he reminded her. And yes, I am. Find it saves time. Kate considered him for a long moment. There was something about his straightforward manner that made her want to be equally honest. I had a situation in Philadelphia. I taught there before St. Louis. What kind of situation? The kind that makes a woman want to start fresh somewhere new. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly chilled despite the mild evening. I made the mistake of believing someone cared for me when they were merely amusing themselves at my expense. Flint's expression darkened. Some man hurt you. It wasn't a question, but Kate nodded anyway. Not physically, just my pride. He made it clear that someone who looks like me should be grateful for any attention, not expect genuine affection. The words hung in the air between them. Kate immediately regretted her candor. I shouldn't have said that. Please forget I mentioned it. He sounds like a fool, Flint said quietly. Kate gave a small, sad smile. No, he was merely being honest. I'm not pretty, Mr. Westwood. I've always known that. Flint studied her for a long moment, his gray eyes intent. Beauty's not just about features, Miss Morrison. It's about spirit. The way a person carries themselves, the light in their eyes when they talk about things that matter. His words caught her off guard. Before she could respond, the church door opened, spilling light and music into the darkness. There you are, Miss Morrison, Mrs. Jenkins called. The children want to sing for you. I should go, Kate said, oddly reluctant to end their conversation. Flint nodded. Good night, Miss Morrison. Kate, she corrected softly, if I'm to call you Flint. He smiled then, a genuine smile that transformed his face and crinkled the corners of his eyes. Good night, Kate. As she returned to the warmth and noise of the social, Kate couldn't help but glance back. Flint was still standing in the shadows, watching her go, and something about his steady gaze made her heart beat a little faster than it should. Monday morning arrived with a sense of anticipation that Kate hadn't felt in months. She stood at the door of the schoolhouse, ringing the brass bell that summoned her new pupils. Children streamed in from all directions, some on foot from town, others arriving on horseback or in wagons from outlying farms and ranches. Among them were Tommy and a young girl Kate assumed was his sister Lily, along with 2 boys who must be the Harmons. The children who worked on Flint's ranch looked clean and well-dressed, their books and slates already provided. Good morning, Kate greeted them, ushering the children inside. Please find a seat. We'll begin as soon as everyone is settled. Once all 32 pupils were seated, ranging in age from 6 to 16, Kate introduced herself and began the process of assessing their knowledge. It quickly became apparent that their education had been spotty with the frequent changes in teachers. Some of the older children read well but struggled with mathematics, while others showed the opposite pattern. By midday, Kate had developed a preliminary plan to group the children according to ability rather than age for certain subjects. As they ate their packed lunches in the schoolyard, she remained at her desk, making notes and planning lessons. A knock at the door interrupted her work. Looking up, she was surprised to see Flint standing in the doorway, his tall frame nearly filling it. Mr. Westwood, she greeted him, automatically straightening her posture. What brings you to the school? Thought I'd check how the first day was going, he replied, stepping inside and removing his hat. Today he looked every inch the working rancher, with dust on his boots and a faded bandana around his neck. And I brought something that might help. He reached into his saddlebag and produced a book, a well-worn copy of Robinson Crusoe. It was my favorite as a boy, he explained, placing it on her desk. Thought your older students might enjoy it for reading practice. Kate ran her fingers over the leather cover. That's very thoughtful. Thank you, Flint shrugged, seeming almost embarrassed by her gratitude. How are Tommy and the others doing? Well enough. Tommy's quite advanced in mathematics. Lily needs help with her reading, but she has a good mind for storytelling. Flint nodded, pleased. Their mother teaches them when she can, but running the cookhouse keeps her busy. You take a strong interest in your workers' families, Kate observed. They're my responsibility, he said simply. There was something in his manner, a sense of duty that went beyond mere obligation that intrigued Kate. You mentioned your mother was a teacher. Is she still living? A shadow crossed Flint's face. No, lost her to fever when I was 14. Father followed 5 years ago. I'm sorry, Kate said softly. It was a long time ago. His tone made it clear the subject was closed. He glanced out the window where the children were playing. I should let you get back to your work. Just wanted to drop off the book. Would you? Kate hesitated, then pushed forward. Would you like to stay for lunch? I have more than enough. Flint looked surprised by the invitation. After a moment, he nodded. Thank you, that's kind of you. Kate unpacked her simple lunch bread, cheese, and apples and shared it with Flint. As they ate, their conversation flowed more easily than she'd expected. He asked intelligent questions about her teaching methods, and she found herself explaining her ideas for grouping students by ability. Makes sense, he agreed. No point holding the quick ones back or rushing the ones who need more time. Exactly, but it means more preparation, Kate admitted. If anyone can manage it, I suspect it's you. There was something in his voice, a note of admiration that warmed her more than it should. The school bell rang, signaling the end of lunch break. As the children began filing back inside, Flint rose to leave. Thank you for lunch, he said, placing his hat back on his head. Thank you for the book, Kate replied. And the conversation, he nodded, a slight smile touching his lips. Good day, Miss Morrison. Kate, she reminded him. Kate, he repeated, the name sounding different in his deep voice. Then he was gone, striding across the schoolyard with long, confident steps, The children watched him go with obvious respect. "Is Mr. Flint sweet on you, Miss Morrison?" One bold girl asked, giggling. "That's enough, Mary," Kate admonished, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. "Back to your seats, everyone. We have a great deal to accomplish this afternoon." As the days passed, Kate settled into a routine. Mornings were spent teaching, afternoons often involved extra help for struggling students, and evenings were dedicated to preparation and grading. She took her meals with the Jenkins family twice a week, slowly building friendships with other townspeople. To her surprise, Flint became a regular visitor to the school. Sometimes he brought books or teaching materials. Other times he came to check on his workers' children or deliver messages from their parents. Each visit left Kate feeling slightly unsettled, aware of his presence in a way that made it difficult to concentrate afterward. One Friday afternoon, nearly 3 weeks after her arrival in Whispering Creek, Kate dismissed her students early. The annual Harvest Festival was the following day, and the excitement had made productive learning impossible. As the last child disappeared down the road, Kate began cleaning the blackboard, humming softly to herself. "You have a nice voice." She turned, startled to find Flint standing in the doorway. "You have a habit of appearing unexpectedly, Mr. Westwood." "Sorry," he said, though he didn't look particularly apologetic. "Came to ask if you'd like a ride to the festival tomorrow." "It's a fair distance to the fairgrounds, and Jenkins mentioned you don't ride." "Oh," Kate was caught off guard by the offer. "That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to impose." "No imposition, I'm going anyway." Kate hesitated. Being seen arriving with Flint would certainly start tongues wagging in the small town. Already, she'd noticed curious glances when he visited the school. "People will talk," she said finally. Flint raised an eyebrow. "They already do. Small towns run on gossip. And that doesn't bother you." He shrugged. "Used to it. Question is, does it bother you?" Kate considered the question. In Philadelphia, the gossip had devastated her. But here, in this new place where she was respected for her skills rather than judged for her appearance, perhaps it mattered less. "No," she decided. "It doesn't. I'd appreciate the ride, thank you." Was it her imagination, or did relief flash across his face? "Good, I'll pick you up at 9. After he left, Kate found herself standing before the small mirror in her quarters, studying her reflection more critically than usual. Her brown hair was pulled back in its customary bun, her dress plain and serviceable. There was nothing about her that would attract a man like Flint Westwood, with his quiet strength and handsome features, and yet the way he looked at her sometimes. It wasn't the dismissive glance she was accustomed to from men. There was a tension in his gaze, a focus that made her feel as if he was truly seeing her. "Don't be foolish," she told her reflection sternly. "He's being kind, nothing more." Still, she found herself selecting her best dress for the festival, a deep blue cotton with a lace collar that her mother had insisted brought out her eyes. It wasn't fashionable by Eastern standards, but it was the prettiest thing she owned. The Harvest Festival was the biggest event of the year in Whispering Creek. The fairgrounds, set in a meadow just outside town, were decorated with ribbons and lanterns. There were competitions for the best produce, livestock judging, games for the children, and dancing planned for the evening. True to his word, Flint arrived at 9 o'clock sharp in a freshly polished buggy. He wore clean dark trousers, a white shirt, and a vest that emphasized his broad shoulders. His hat was new, or at least rarely worn, and his boots gleamed with polish. "You look nice," he said as he helped her into the buggy, his hand warm and strong around hers. "Thank you," Kate replied, smoothing her skirts. "So do you." The drive to the fairgrounds took about 20 minutes. At first they rode in silence, but gradually began to talk about the school, the upcoming winter, books they had both enjoyed. Kate was surprised to discover how well-read Flint was, despite having no formal education beyond what his mother had provided. "I order books from Denver," he explained when she commented on it. "Reading passes the long winter evenings." "It must get lonely out at the ranch," Kate observed. Flint was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes, but I've got good people working for me, and the land, it gets in your blood. Becomes part of you." The passion in his voice when he spoke of the ranch stirred something in Kate. Here was a man who knew his purpose, who was connected to something larger than himself. When they arrived at the festival, Kate was conscious of the looks they received. Flint seemed oblivious or perhaps simply unconcerned as he helped her down from the buggy. Miss Morrison, several of her students ran up, eager to show her the games and exhibits. Flint stepped back, a slight smile on his face. "Go on," he said. "I've got some business to attend to." "Find you later," Kate nodded, allowing herself to be pulled away by the excited children. The day passed in a blur of activity, judging children's drawings, watching pie-eating contests, admiring prize cattle and vegetables. Several times, she caught glimpses of Flint across the fairground, talking with ranchers or helping to organize the horse races. As afternoon faded into evening, lanterns were lit and a space cleared for dancing. Musicians set up on a small platform, tuning fiddles and guitars. The townspeople gathered around, anticipation building for the night's entertainment. "Quite a turnout," Walter Jenkins commented, appearing at Kate's side. "Having a good time, wonderful," Kate replied sincerely. "Everyone's been so welcoming." "Noticed you arrived with Flint Westwood," Jenkins said, his tone casual but his eyes curious. "He kindly offered me a ride," Kate explained, feeling a flush rise to her cheeks. Jenkins studied her for a moment. "Flint's a good man, but he's had his share of troubles. Been keeping to himself these past few years." Before Kate could ask what he meant, the music started a lively reel that had couples quickly forming lines on the dance floor. "May I have this dance, Miss Morrison?" Jenkins asked, offering his arm. Despite her reservations about her dancing abilities, Kate found herself enjoying the energetic reels and simple country dances. The atmosphere was relaxed and joyful, with no one paying much attention to missteps or missed turns. She had just finished a dance with the town blacksmith when she turned to find Flint standing before her, hat in hand. "Would you honor me with the next dance?" he asked, his deep voice carrying a formal note that seemed at odds with his usual directness. "I warn you, I'm not very skilled," Kate replied, remembering her embarrassment at the church social. "Neither am I," Flint admitted with a slight smile. "We can be awkward together." The musicians struck up a waltz, and Kate felt a moment of panic. A waltz meant being held closely, Flint's hand at her waist, his face near hers. But when he led her onto the floor, his touch was respectful, his hold proper. He guided her through the steps with surprising grace for a man who spent his days on horseback. "You lied," Kate accused lightly. "You dance very well. My mother insisted I learn, said no son of hers would stomp around a dance floor like a bull in a china shop." The image made Kate laugh. "She sounds like a remarkable woman." She was. There was that softness again when he spoke of his mother. "You remind me of her sometimes, the way you are with the children, patient but firm." Kate wasn't sure how to respond to the unexpected compliment. They continued to waltz, moving together with increasing confidence. She was acutely aware of his hand at her waist, the clean scent of soap and leather that clung to him, the way his eyes never left her face. "People are watching us," she murmured, noticing the curious glances directed their way. "Let them," Flint replied. "I'm dancing with the prettiest woman at the festival. They're bound to be jealous." Kate missed a step, stumbling slightly. Flint steadied her, concern in his eyes. "Are you all right?" "Yes, I just—" She looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of mockery or insincerity. There was none. "You shouldn't say things like that." "Why not?" "Because it isn't true, and I don't need false compliments." Flint's expression hardened slightly. "I told you before, Kate, I don't say things I don't mean." The music ended and they stood for a moment, still in the dance position. Around them, couples were leaving the floor, new ones forming for the next dance. "Would you like to get some air?" Flint asked quietly. Kate nodded, unable to trust her voice. He led her away from the crowded dance floor, past the food tables and game booths to a quiet spot at the edge of the fairground. Here, the sounds of music and laughter were muted, and the stars overhead seemed brighter. "I've upset you," Flint said. "That wasn't my intention." Kate wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly chilled despite the mild evening. "I'm not upset, I know what I am, Flint, what I look like. I've made my peace with it." "And what is that, exactly?" His voice had a dangerous edge to it, plain, ordinary, not the kind of woman men notice. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "Julian, the man in Philadelphia, he made that very clear." Julian, Flint repeated, the name sounding like a curse on his lips. The fool who hurt you. He didn't hurt me. He merely stated the truth. The truth. Flint took a step closer, his eyes intense in the dim light. The truth is that this Julian was blind or stupid or both. The truth is that when you walk into a room, it brightens. The truth is that your eyes change color depending on your mood, dark like coffee when you're serious, amber flecks when you laugh. Kate stared at him, stunned by the passion in his voice. The truth, Flint continued, his voice dropping lower, is that you're the most beautiful woman I've ever known, Kate Morrison. Not because of your features, though God knows I find them lovely enough, but because of who you are, how you care for those children. How you stand straight and proud despite whatever happened in your past, how you see the best in people, even a rough cowboy who doesn't know how to properly court a lady. Court, Kate echoed faintly. Flint ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of uncertainty. I'm not doing this right. I had a whole speech planned, but it's gone clean out of my head. What speech? The one where I ask permission to call on you properly. To bring you flowers and take you on Sunday drives and whatever else a gentleman is supposed to do when he's interested in a lady. Kate felt as if the ground beneath her feet had shifted. You're interested in me, romantically? Have been since I first saw you step off that stagecoach, Flint admitted. Thought it was obvious. It wasn't, not to me. Kate shook her head in disbelief. Why would someone like you be interested in someone like me? Flint's expression softened. Because you're exactly what I've been looking for without even knowing it. Someone real. Someone true. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away and brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. His fingers were calloused but gentle against her skin. I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give, Kate. Just a chance to show you that what that fool Julian said isn't the truth. Not by a long shot. Kate's heart hammered in her chest. Part of her, the part that had been hurt and humiliated in Philadelphia, screamed that this was another cruel joke, that men like Flint Westwood didn't fall for plain schoolteachers. But the look in his eyes, earnest and vulnerable, told a different story. I'd like that, she whispered finally. I'd like that very much. The smile that spread across Flint's face was like the sun breaking through clouds. For a moment, Kate thought he might kiss her, but instead he offered his arm. May I escort you back to the dance, Miss Morrison? Kate placed her hand on his arm, feeling the solid strength beneath the fabric of his shirt. You may, Mr. Westwood. As they returned to the bright lights and music of the festival, Kate felt a lightness in her step that had nothing to do with the dancing. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she allowed herself to hope that perhaps, just perhaps, there might be someone who could look at her and see beauty. The weeks following the Harvest Festival brought changes to Kate's life that she could scarcely have imagined when she'd first arrived in Whispering Creek. True to his word, Flint began courting her, properly bringing flowers to the schoolhouse, escorting her to church on Sundays, taking her for drives in his buggy on pleasant afternoons. The townspeople noticed, of course. Some, like the Jenkins, seemed pleased by the development. Others watched with curiosity or, in the case of several unmarried women, with barely concealed jealousy. Kate tried not to let the whispers bother her, focusing instead on her teaching and on the unexpected joy of Flint's company. As October gave way to November, the weather turned colder. One crisp Saturday afternoon, Flint arrived at her door with his buggy and a proposal. Thought you might like to see the ranch, he suggested. It's a fine day for a drive, and Mrs. Torres, that's Tommy and Lily's mother, has prepared a special lunch. Kate hesitated only briefly before agreeing. She'd heard much about the Lazy W but had never visited. As they drove out of town, the landscape opened up before them, rolling hills dotted with pine and aspen, the distant mountains etched sharply against the clear blue sky. It's beautiful, Kate breathed, taking in the vastness of it. Wait until you see the ranch, Flint replied, a note of pride in his voice. The Lazy W exceeded Kate's expectations. The main house was a substantial two-story structure built of solid timber with a wide porch wrapping around three sides. Nearby stood a large barn, bunkhouse, cookhouse, and various outbuildings, all well-maintained and arranged with an eye for efficiency. Your father built all this? Kate asked as Flint helped her down from the buggy, started it. I've added to it over the years." He gestured toward a distant pasture where cattle grazed. "We run about 2,000 head now, plus some horses we breed and train specially." Several ranch hands called greetings as Flint led Kate toward the main house. She recognized Tommy among them, working with an older man to repair a wagon wheel. "This is where you grew up?" Kate asked as they climbed the porch steps. Flint nodded, opening the door for her. "Born in the bedroom upstairs." The interior of the house was surprisingly refined for a bachelor's residence. The furniture was solid and well-crafted, the floors covered with good quality rugs. Bookshelves lined one wall of the sitting room, filled with volumes that made Kate's fingers itch to explore them. "Your mother's influence," she guessed, noting the feminine touches curtains at the windows, a vase of dried flowers on the mantel. "Partly," Flint acknowledged, "and partly Mrs. Torres. She keeps house for me along with running the cookhouse." As if summoned by her name, a plump, dark-haired woman appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Flint, you've brought Miss Morrison at last," Mrs. Torres, Flint introduced. "This is Miss Katherine Morrison, our new schoolteacher." "Welcome, welcome," Mrs. Torres beamed, clasping Kate's hands warmly. "Lily and Tommy speak so highly of you, and this one," she nodded toward Flint, "has talked of little else since you arrived in town." "Mrs. Torres," Flint protested, a hint of color touching his cheeks. The older woman waved away his embarrassment. "It's good to see you taking an interest, Mr. Flint. Too long you've been alone in this big house." She turned back to Kate. "Come, lunch is ready in the dining room. I've made my special chicken and dumplings." Lunch was a delightful affair. Mrs. Torres was an excellent cook, and her warm, motherly presence made Kate feel immediately at ease. She peppered Kate with questions about her teaching and her life back east, while Flint mostly listened, a small smile playing about his lips. After the meal, Flint showed Kate around the property, the barn with its fine horses, the spring-fed pond where he'd learned to swim as a boy, the small family cemetery where his parents rested beneath a stand of aspen trees. "My mother would have liked you," Flint said as they stood beside the simple granite markers. "She always valued education, always wanted me to marry a woman with a mind of her own." The casual mention of marriage made Kate's heart skip a beat, but Flint didn't seem to notice what he'd said. He moved on, showing her a grove of apple trees his father had planted when Flint was born. "They're still producing after all these years," Kate remarked, admiring the gnarled but healthy trees. "Good stock," Flint replied, "and well tended." He reached up, plucking a late-season apple from a branch. "Last ones of the year." He polished the apple on his sleeve and offered it to Kate. The simple gesture, reminiscent of Adam and Eve, carried a weight of meaning that made her blush as she accepted it. The apple was crisp and sweet, its flavor intensified by the late harvest. As Kate took a bite, she was conscious of Flint watching her, his gray eyes warm with an emotion she was only beginning to recognize. "What?" she asked, self-conscious under his gaze. "Just thinking how right you look here," he replied. "As if you belong." The words hung in the air between them, full of possibility. Kate felt a tremor of something like fear, but also anticipation. She'd come to Whispering Creek to escape the past, not to find a future. Yet here was Flint Westwood, offering her glimpses of what that future might hold. "It's a beautiful place," she said finally. "You've built something remarkable here. Built it, yes, but it's never felt quite complete." Flint took a step closer, his voice dropping lower. "Not until now." He reached out, gently brushing a stray leaf from her hair. His hand lingered, fingertips grazing her cheek in a touch so light she might have imagined it. "Kate," he began, his voice rough with emotion, "I know it hasn't been long, but I need to tell you, Mr. Flint." Tommy's voice called from the direction of the house. "Ryder coming in, says it's urgent." Flint closed his eyes briefly, frustration evident in the set of his jaw. "We'll be right there," he called back. "I'm sorry," he said to Kate. "Duty calls." "Of course," she replied, trying to hide her disappointment. Whatever Flint had been about to say would have to wait. They walked back to the house in silence, the moment broken. A man Kate didn't recognize was waiting on the porch, his horse lathered from hard riding. "Sorry to interrupt your afternoon, Westwood," the man said, tipping his hat to Kate. "Sheriff sent me. There's trouble brewing with the Mitchell gang. They've been spotted in the area." Kate saw Flint's expression harden. Mitchell, I thought he was still in prison. Got out 3 months ago. Word is he's looking to settle old scores. Who is Mitchell? Kate asked. Flint and the messenger exchanged a look. Jed Mitchell is an outlaw, Flint explained, his voice tight. He and his gang rustled cattle from several ranches in the area a few years back. When we caught them, there was a shootout. Mitchell killed one of my men before the sheriff arrested him. And now he's back, the messenger added grimly. Sheriff's organizing a posse to track them down before they cause more trouble. Wants all the able men he can get, Flint nodded. Tell him I'll be there within the hour. He turned to Kate, regret in his eyes. I need to get you back to town. The ride back to Whispering Creek was tense, the easy companionship of earlier replaced by Flint's preoccupation with the news. As they approached the schoolhouse, Kate finally broke the silence. Will it be dangerous, going after these men? Flint's hands tightened on the reins. Mitchell's dangerous, yes, but we'll be prepared this time. He drew the buggy to a stop outside her quarters. For a moment, neither moved. I'm sorry our day was cut short, Flint said finally. There was more I wanted to show you, more I wanted to say. It will keep, Kate assured him, though anxiety gnawed at her. Just be careful. Flint helped her down from the buggy, his hands lingering on her waist longer than strictly necessary. I will, and Kate. Yes, what I was going to say earlier. I'll tell you when I get back, I promise. With that, he climbed back into the buggy and drove away, leaving Kate standing on the steps, her heart torn between the sweetness of the afternoon and the shadow that had fallen over its end. 3 days passed with no word from Flint or the posse. Kate tried to focus on her teaching, but worry was a constant companion. The children sensed her distraction, especially Tommy and Lily, who were equally concerned for their benefactor. Mr. Flint's real good with a gun, Tommy assured her during lunch break on the 3rd day. And he's smart. He won't take no foolish risks. Kate managed a smile for the boys' benefit. I'm sure you're right, Tommy. That afternoon, as Kate was dismissing the children, she spotted a rider approaching the schoolhouse at a gallop. Her heart leaped, thinking it might be Flint, but she quickly realized it was Walter Jenkins. Miss Morrison, he called, reining in his horse. You need to come quickly. There's been trouble with the posse. Flint's been hurt. Kate felt the blood drain from her face. How badly? Shot in the shoulder. Dr. Wilson's with him now at his ranch. Mrs. Jenkins thought you'd want to know. Without hesitation, Kate gathered her shawl. Can you take me there? The ride to the Lazy W was a blur of fear and prayer. Jenkins explained what little he knew. The posse had tracked the Mitchell gang to an abandoned mine. There had been a shootout, and Flint had taken a bullet while protecting one of the younger deputies. Mitchell got away, Jenkins added grimly, but they caught 2 of his men. When they arrived at the ranch, the yard was busy with activity. Several horses were being tended to, and men moved purposefully between buildings. Jenkins helped Kate down and led her to the main house. Mrs. Torres met them at the door, her round face creased with worry. He's upstairs with the doctor. Bullet went clean through his shoulder, thank the Lord, but he's lost blood and there's risk of fever. Can I see him? Kate asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Mrs. Torres nodded. Doctor's just finishing up, first door at the top of the stairs. Kate climbed the stairs, her heart pounding. The first door stood ajar and she could hear low voices within. Taking a deep breath, she knocked lightly. Come in, called a voice she didn't recognize. The bedroom was large and simply furnished, dominated by a heavy wooden bed where Flint lay, his upper body bare except for bandages wrapped around his left shoulder and chest. His face was pale beneath his tan, his eyes closed, an older man with spectacles. Doctor Wilson, she presumed, was packing instruments into a black bag. Ah, Miss Morrison, Mrs. Jenkins said you'd be coming. How is he? Kate asked, her eyes fixed on Flint's still form. Lucky, the doctor replied. Bullet missed anything vital. Clean wound, should heal well enough with rest and care. He's sleeping now, gave him laudanum for the pain. Will he? Kate swallowed hard. Will he recover fully, barring infection? Yes, he's strong and healthy. The doctor closed his bag with a snap. He'll need to be watched for fever. I've left instructions with Mrs. Torres, but another set of hands wouldn't go amiss. I'll stay, Kate said immediately. Dr. Wilson nodded, unsurprised. Good, send for me if his fever rises or if there's increased bleeding or swelling. He paused at the door. He was asking for you, you know, before the laudanum took effect. After the doctor left, Kate moved to the bedside. Flint looked vulnerable in sleep. The usual strength and vitality of his features softened. A dark bruise marked his jaw, and scrapes on his knuckles suggested he'd been in a physical fight before being shot. Gently, she touched his hand, relief washing over her at the warmth of his skin. He was alive, wounded but alive. Kate, her head jerked up to find Flint's eyes open, cloudy with pain and medication but focused on her face. I'm here, she said, squeezing his hand. Don't try to talk. You need to rest. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Bossy schoolteacher. Reckless cowboy, she countered, tears threatening despite her attempt at humor. Not reckless, he murmured, his words slightly slurred. Careful, very careful, had to come back to you. His eyelids drooped, the laudanum pulling him back toward sleep. Promise to tell you. Later, Kate whispered, brushing hair from his forehead. Tell me later, sleep now. Flint's eyes closed, his breathing deepening as he drifted off. Kate settled into a chair beside the bed, prepared for a long vigil. True to Dr. Wilson's warning, fever set in during the night. Kate and Mrs. Torres took turns bathing Flint's face and chest with cool water, monitoring his temperature with anxious attention. He drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes lucid, other times lost in fevered dreams that had him calling out names Kate didn't recognize. Dawn was breaking when the fever finally broke. Kate, dozing in the chair beside the bed, woke to find Flint watching her, his gray eyes clear for the first time in hours. You stayed, he said, his voice rough but stronger. Kate straightened, pushing hair from her face. Of course I stayed. You look exhausted. And you look like a man who's been shot, she retorted, relief making her sharp. Which is worse, do you think? Flint chuckled, then winced as the movement jarred his injured shoulder. Fair point. How do you feel? Kate asked, moving to pour water from a pitcher on the bedside table. Like I've been trampled by a herd of cattle, but I'll live. He accepted the water gratefully, managing to sit up slightly with Kate's help. After he drank, he settled back against the pillows, studying her face. You were worried about me. It wasn't a question, but Kate answered anyway. Yes. We all were. But you stayed all night, risked your reputation to be here unchaperoned. Kate flushed. In her concern for Flint, she hadn't considered the impropriety of spending the night in his home, in his bedroom no less. Mrs. Torres was here, she said weakly. Not all the time, Flint pointed out. People will talk. Let them, Kate replied, echoing his words from the Harvest Festival. I don't care what they say. Flint's expression softened. I was going to tell you something before all this happened. Kate's heart quickened. Yes, you mentioned that, at the orchard. I love you, Kate Morrison. The words, spoken simply and directly, hung in the air between them. Kate stared at him, momentarily speechless. I know it hasn't been long, Flint continued, and I know you might not feel the same yet. But life out here is uncertain. This, he gestured to his wounded shoulder, proves that. I didn't want to waste any more time not telling you. Kate felt tears prick her eyes. Flint, you don't have to say anything now, he interrupted. Just know that to me, you're the most beautiful woman in the world. Not just your face or your figure, though God knows I find both lovely enough, but your spirit, your kindness, your strength. I love all of it, all of you. A tear slipped down Kate's cheek. I'm not pretty, she whispered, Julian's cruel words echoing in her mind. The hell you aren't, Flint said fiercely. Who told you that? That fool in Philadelphia. He was blind, Kate, or cruel, or both. He reached for her hand, his grip surprisingly strong for a man recovering from a gunshot wound. I've known beautiful women before, the kind that turn heads wherever they go, and none of them, not one, has ever made me feel the way you do when you smile at me. Kate looked down at their joined hands, her heart so full she could scarcely breathe. I was so afraid, she admitted. When Jenkins said you'd been shot, I thought I might lose you before. Before what? Flint prompted gently. Before I could tell you that I love you too. The words, once spoken, seemed to release something inside her, a fear she'd carried since Philadelphia, a belief that she was somehow unworthy of being truly loved. Flint's smile was radiant despite his pallor. Come here, he said, tugging lightly on her hand. Kate moved from the chair to sit carefully on the edge of the bed. Flint reached up with his good arm, his hand cupping her cheek. "I'm going to kiss you now," he murmured. "If that's all right." Kate nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Flint drew her down to him, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that was gentle at first, then deepened as she responded. It was nothing like the stolen, fumbling kiss Julian had once pressed on her. This was a promise, a declaration, a beginning. When they finally parted, both breathless, Flint's eyes were dark with emotion. "Marry me, Kate." "What?" She pulled back slightly, startled by the sudden proposal. "Marry me," he repeated. "Not right away, I know you need time, and I'm in no condition for a wedding at the moment." His lips quirked in a wry smile. "But say you'll be my wife. Say you'll make this house a home again. Say you'll let me spend the rest of my life showing you just how beautiful you are to me." Kate searched his face, finding nothing but sincerity in his steady gaze. This was no joke, no cruel game. This was Flint Westwood, a man who said what he meant and meant what he said, offering her his heart and his future. "Yes," she whispered, joy bubbling up inside her like a spring. "Yes, I'll marry you." Flint pulled her down for another kiss, this one sealed with laughter and tears and the promise of tomorrow. "I should warn you," he murmured against her lips. "Mrs. Torres will be insufferable when she hears the news. She's been trying to find me a wife for years." Kate laughed, happiness making her light-headed, or perhaps it was lack of sleep and the emotional exhaustion of the night. "I think I can bear her satisfaction if you can." A knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Torres entered, carrying a tray with breakfast and fresh bandages. Her eyes widened at finding Kate seated on the bed, still holding Flint's hand, but her surprise quickly gave way to a knowing smile. "I see our patient is feeling better," she observed, setting down the tray. "And perhaps there is other good news as well." Flint met Kate's eyes, a question in his gaze. At her nod, he turned to Mrs. Torres. "Miss Morrison has agreed to become Mrs. Westwood." The older woman's face lit up with delight. "Gracias a Dios, it's about time, Mr. Flint." She bustled forward to kiss Kate's cheek and pat Flint's good shoulder. "This calls for a special dinner. When you're stronger, of course." As Mrs. Torres fussed about the room, chattering about wedding plans and how they'd need to redecorate the master bedroom, Kate exchanged an amused glance with Flint. His gray eyes were warm with love and a hint of mischief. "Too late to change your mind," he whispered, squeezing her hand. "You're stuck with us now." Kate smiled, feeling truly beautiful for the first time in her life. "There's nowhere else I'd rather be." News of the engagement spread quickly through Whispering Creek. Most of the townspeople received it with pleasure, though Kate noticed a few disappointed looks from ladies who might have harbored hopes regarding the eligible rancher themselves. The school board granted Kate permission to continue teaching until the end of the term, though they would need to find a replacement after the wedding. "You don't have to give up teaching entirely," Flint assured her as they sat on the porch of the schoolhouse one afternoon. His recovery was progressing well, though he still wore his arm in a sling. "We could set up a classroom at the ranch for the children of the workers, and there's always our own children to consider." The casual mention of children, their children, sent a warm flush through Kate. "You want a family." "Very much," Flint replied, his eyes serious. "I grew up an only child, always wanted a house full of kids." He hesitated. "If that's what you want too." Kate nodded, a vision of little boys with Flint's gray eyes and little girls with her love of books filling her mind. "It is, very much." With the wedding planned for the spring, after the school term ended, Kate found herself busier than ever. Between teaching, planning for her successor, and the preparations for becoming mistress of the Lazy W, she had little time for reflection. But sometimes, in quiet moments, she marveled at the turn her life had taken. She'd come to Whispering Creek to escape the past, to build a quiet, independent life away from painful memories. Instead, she'd found Flint a man who looked at her as if she were the only woman in the world, who loved her not despite her perceived flaws, but as a complete person, exactly as she was. One cold December afternoon, Kate was grading papers in the empty schoolhouse when the door opened, bringing a gust of winter air and the tall figure of her fiancé. "Thought I might find you still working," Flint said, brushing snow from his coat. His shoulder had healed enough that he no longer needed the sling, though he still favored that arm. "Just finishing up," Kate replied, smiling at the sight of him. "What brings you to town? I thought you were meeting with the cattle buyers today. Finished early." He approached her desk, something hidden behind his back. "Brought you something." From behind his back, he produced a small mirror in a silver frame. Kate took it, puzzled. "It's lovely, but—" "Look at yourself," Flint instructed, his voice gentle. Reluctantly, Kate raised the mirror. Her reflection stared back at her, the same features she'd always considered plain and unremarkable. "What do you see?" Flint asked, moving to stand behind her. Kate sighed. "The same face I've always had. Let me tell you what I see." Flint placed his hands on her shoulders, his eyes meeting hers in the mirror. "I see eyes that light up when you're teaching something you love. I see a mouth that smiles with genuine warmth for everyone, not just those deemed important. I see strength in the set of your jaw, kindness in the lines around your eyes." His hands moved to frame her face, turning her gently to face him. "I see the woman I love, the most beautiful woman in the world to me." Kate's vision blurred with tears. "Flint, Julian lied to you, Kate." Or maybe he just couldn't see what was right in front of him. Either way, he was wrong. "You're not just pretty, you're beautiful, inside and out." He kissed her then, a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. When they parted, Kate felt something shift inside her, the final laying to rest of Julian's cruel words, the acceptance that in Flint's eyes, at least, she was indeed beautiful. "I love you," she whispered against his lips. "And I love you," he replied, "now and always." Outside, snow began to fall more heavily, blanketing Whispering Creek in pristine white. But inside the schoolhouse, Kate and Flint were warm in each other's arms. Two souls who had found in each other exactly what they needed: acceptance, understanding, and a love that saw beyond the surface to the true beauty within. Spring came to Colorado in a riot of wildflowers and the fresh green of new growth. On a perfect May morning, with the mountains standing sentinel in the distance, Kate Morrison became Kate Westwood in a ceremony held under the apple trees at the Lazy W Ranch. The entire town turned out for the celebration, along with ranchers and their families from miles around. Kate wore a gown of ivory silk that Mrs. Jenkins had helped her select on a trip to Denver, with wildflowers in her hair instead of a veil. Flint, standing tall and handsome in a new black suit, watched her approach with such naked adoration that several ladies in the audience dabbed at their eyes. "Never seen a man look at a woman quite like that," Walter Jenkins murmured to his wife as they watched the couple exchange vows. "That's because Flint sees with his heart, not just his eyes," Mrs. Jenkins replied wisely. "And what a lucky woman Kate is for it." After the ceremony, tables were set up under the trees for a feast prepared by Mrs. Torres and the women of the town. There was dancing and laughter, with children running between the tables and old-timers telling stories of the early days of Whispering Creek. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the ranch yard, Flint found Kate talking with her former pupils. He slipped an arm around her waist, drawing her close. "Happy Mrs. Westwood," he murmured in her ear. Kate leaned into his embrace, contentment washing over her like a wave. "Happier than I ever thought possible, Mr. Westwood." Later, after the guests had departed, and they were finally alone in the main house, their home now, Flint led Kate to the master bedroom. It had been redecorated under Mrs. Torres's supervision, with new curtains and a handmade quilt on the large four-poster bed. "Welcome home," Flint said, his voice husky with emotion. Kate turned in his arms, her heart so full it seemed impossible to contain all she felt. "I love you, Flint Westwood. Thank you for seeing beauty in me when I couldn't see it in myself." Flint cradled her face in his hands, his gray eyes serious in the lamplight. "I'll spend the rest of my life helping you see what I see, Kate. That's my promise to you." As he lowered his lips to hers, Kate knew with absolute certainty that whatever challenges life might bring, she would face them with this man by her side, this man who loved her as if she were the only beauty in the world. And in his eyes, she was. 5 years later, the sound of children's laughter echoed across the yard of the Lazy W as Kate Westwood stood on the porch, watching her husband teach their 3-year-old son, James, to sit on a gentle pony. Their 5-year-old daughter, Elizabeth, pranced around them, already an accomplished rider at her young age. "Mama, look," Elizabeth called, her brown hair the same unruly texture as Kate's escaping from its braid. "Jamie's riding all by himself." "I see, sweetheart," Kate called back, one hand resting on her swollen belly where their third child grew. According to Dr. Wilson, they could expect the new arrival within the month. Flint glanced up, catching her eye across the yard. 5 years of marriage had only deepened the love between them. If anything, he looked at her with even more tenderness now, the mother of his children, the heart of his home, the partner in all his endeavors. The Lazy W had prospered under their joint stewardship. Kate had indeed established a small school for the ranch children, teaching 3 days a week, while a young woman from town handled the other days. The ranch had expanded, with new breeding stock and additional grazing land purchased from a neighboring property. Life wasn't without its challenges. There had been a difficult winter 2 years back when they'd lost cattle to the cold. There had been tension with new settlers encroaching on traditional grazing routes. There had been the heartache of a miscarriage between Elizabeth and James. But through it all, they had faced each challenge together, their bond strengthening with each test. Flint lifted Jamie down from the pony and whispered something in the boy's ear. The child nodded solemnly, then ran toward the porch, his sister following close behind. "Mama." Jamie called, his gray eyes exact replicas of his father's wide with excitement. "Papa says to tell you he loves you to the mountains and back," Kate laughed, bending as much as her pregnancy would allow to embrace her children. "Did he now? And what else did Papa say?" "That you're the prettiest mama in all of Colorado," Elizabeth reported dutifully. "And that we should give you big hugs because you're growing our new baby brother or sister." "Is that so?" Kate looked up to find Flint approaching, his tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun. Even now, the sight of him made her heart beat faster. "I might have mentioned something along those lines," he admitted with a grin as he joined them on the porch. He bent to kiss her, ignoring the children's giggles. "Though I believe what I actually said was that your mother is the most beautiful woman in the world, and we're the luckiest family in Colorado to have her." Kate smiled against his lips. "Flatterer, truth-teller," he corrected, his hand coming to rest protectively over hers on her belly. "Always have been where you're concerned." Later that evening, after the children were tucked in bed with stories and kisses, Kate stood before the mirror in their bedroom, studying her reflection. At 27, she was no longer the insecure young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach in Whispering Creek 5 years ago. Motherhood and happiness had softened her features, added a fullness to her figure that pregnancy only enhanced. But it wasn't just the physical changes she noticed. It was the confidence in her posture, the light in her eyes, the contentment that radiated from within. "Beautiful," Flint murmured, coming to stand behind her, his arms encircling her waist, hands cradling her rounded belly. "Even like this?" Kate asked, gesturing to her pregnant form. "Especially like this," he assured her, pressing a kiss to the curve of her neck. "Carrying our child, glowing with life. How could you be anything but beautiful to me?" Kate leaned back against his solid strength, gratitude washing over her. Julian Prescott and Philadelphia seemed like another lifetime, now a painful memory that had lost its power to wound her. "I was thinking," she said, turning in Flint's arms, "if this baby is a girl, we might name her after your mother." Emotion flickered in Flint's eyes. "She'd have loved that. Almost as much as she would have loved you. And if it's a boy, how about Frederick after your father?" Kate nodded, touched by his thoughtfulness. "I'd like that very much." Flint's hand caressed her cheek, his touch as reverent as it had been on their wedding night. "Have I told you today how much I love you, Kate Westwood? You might have mentioned it," she teased, "but I never tire of hearing it." "Good," he replied, his voice deepening with emotion and desire, "because I plan to keep telling you for the rest of our lives." As his lips found hers in a kiss filled with promise and passion, Kate knew with absolute certainty that she had found her true home not just in this house or on this land, but in the heart of this man who had always seen in her what she had been unable to see in herself. She had come to Whispering Creek believing herself plain and unlovable, carrying the weight of Julian's cruel judgment. She had found instead a love that transformed her, not by changing who she was, but by helping her see her own worth through the eyes of someone who treasured every part of her. "I love you," she whispered against Flint's lips. "Thank you for loving me as I am. Always," he promised, gathering her close. "As you are, as you have been, as you will be, the only beauty in my world, Kate, the only one I'll ever need." And in that moment, with the man she loved and the family they had created, Kate knew that true beauty came not from perfect features or fashionable appearances, but from being truly seen and wholly loved, a lesson worth crossing half a continent to learn.